Welcome back to another exciting episode of Cyber Defense Webinars. I'm your host, Gary Malewski, and the publisher of Cyber Defense Magazine. Today's webinar is entitled The Top 5 Automated Attack Vectors Targeting Your Applications and Customers and How to Stop Them. Now, sophisticated automated attacks and fraud actors are severely impacting applications, creating a heyday for cyber criminals to exploit stolen data and credentials for account takeover attacks. And like enterprises, bad actors are using automation to work faster and more efficiently. You thought cybersecurity AI was going to help you. They've been using it to help them. The cyber criminals are trying their best to get one step ahead of us and do some very sophisticated attacks, even mimicking consumer behavior and device behavior to fly under the radar of anomaly-based detection methods. Now, White Ops is the coolest company in this area dealing with automated attacks. In fact, they recently helped the FBI in the largest online ad tech fraud investigation that the FBI ever dealt with. Here's the good news. 4 Russians were extradited. Let me say it again. 4 Russians were extradited to the United States to face consequences of their crime, and they're now serving 40 years between them. Brands are cheated out of somewhere between $6.5 billion and $19 billion annually in digital ad fraud schemes. And usually criminals like these 4 Russians get away with it. Not anymore, not with White Ops. And let me tell you about our great speakers. Today, I would like to introduce Dr. Russell Handorf. Russ works for White Ops as a principal threat intelligence hacker, where he develops technology to detect and deter some of the most advanced botnets you will ever hear about in your life. He recently worked at the FBI in Cyber Division's Technical Operations Unit. And Frank Walsh, the VP of Solutions Engineering at White Ops. Frank brings extensive cyber technical leadership experience to his role as the Vice President of Solutions Engineering. He manages the White Ops global sales engineering team and all enterprise security integration efforts connected to the White Ops platform. Russ, Frank, thank you for coming today and welcome.
Great, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excited to be here.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. As was shared, my name is Frank Walsh. I'm the Vice President of Solution Engineering here at White Ops. I'm excited to be participating today to talk about the top 5 automated attack vectors we're seeing and strategies we believe here at White Ops can help solve them. To start out, let's talk a little bit about White Ops and our mission. White Ops was founded the better part of a decade ago under the mission statement, keep it human. And you see my shirt, keep it human. And we're focused on keeping music human, advertising human, marketing human, connected TV human, social media, e-commerce, banking, healthcare. Any way in which technology touches our lives, we believe keeping it human and making sure that good humans are using the technology to better the lives of others is really core to what we're here to accomplish. Just to provide a couple figures about the organization, we deliver a technology that collects signal from desktops, endpoints, mobile devices, connected TVs, and identifies any instance where a technology is being used to abuse any application that has a presence on the internet. So as you can see, a bunch of different logos here. Today, we verify the humanity over 10 trillion interactions a week. We defend some of the largest internet platforms in the world. If you're searching, shopping, or socializing on the web, there's a good chance you're contributing to the White Ops mission. For me, the last 5 years in application security, I've seen really the world changing at an amazing pace. Distributed technology platforms and services occupy a big portion of almost all of our lives on a day-to-day, even a minute-to-minute basis. And bots, both good and bad, are part of the way we live. Examples of a few good bots: Alexa skills, Google search crawlers enable us, tools like one that I'm really in love with, If This Then That allows you to connect different technologies in your life to achieve really cool outcomes. I mean, it's even got to the point where coffee pots, my window blinds, my kitchen faucet are all automated using technology. Today, I want to talk about how bad bots are doing the work of bad humans and are really changing the way we think about our cyber threat landscape. And more broadly the way we think about what services and how we offer services to both employees and customers. So let's talk a little bit about bots, automated attacks, and how they're changing the world. And to start out, let's look at a quote from our founder, Tamer Hassan, and think about this quote first. The first time I read this quote, I really thought of the productivity, the speed, the scale, the reach I'd be able to achieve with the power of 1 million humans at my fingertips, right? But let's change our frame of reference and think how that productivity, speed, scale, and reach could be applied by a bad human. And now let's take a step further and say to ourselves, how could that power and reach and scale be applied by an evil human? Really, the power that someone could have with this type of technology at their fingertips is unbelievable. And this is where we see sophisticated bots, sophisticated automated attacks pursuing sophisticated outcomes on a daily basis. The top 5 attacks on applications and consumers that we're seeing today, characterized here on the screen: account takeover, new account fraud, inventory sniping, transaction fraud, and review fraud. But really, quite honestly, those are just the tip of the iceberg as it relates to sophisticated attacks that are targeting enterprises. It really starts out at the basic idea. I think we all thought of bots 10 years ago as denying service, supporting distributed denial of service attacks. Now we're starting to see folks in the world really recognize the power that these technologies have in stuffing stolen credentials, brute forcing protected platforms, login interfaces, creating accounts that could be used later to tilt or skew the capabilities of a platform, abusing buying and selling functions of a platform to reap financial gain in secondary markets. We're seeing hoarding inventory. I think last week we saw PlayStation 5 sell out in mere minutes due to bots. Fraudulently affecting advertising buys, fraudulently using credit cards, loyalty programs, memberships, scraping sensitive and proprietary content, identifying ways in which they can tilt the way your organization and customers make accurate decisions through review fraud and through maybe even usage. We're seeing really dangerous and damning ways in which attackers have found focus on sophisticated outcomes at scale using the power of millions of humans. Dr. Russell, you want to add any thoughts on this topic?
Sure. Yeah, and some of the real world instances in which these bots attack and actually can drive policy is, if anyone remembers from a couple of years ago, when the FCC put out to comment, public comment in particular, requests about information about net neutrality, and a significant amount of fake identities went in and applied their perspective and vote and comments, but they were bots, and it drove policy and it drove governmental decision. So it is a issue at scale, and it does definitely impact a wide variety of different customers in ways that they never really considered before. Because this is no longer about making beer money. This can go everywhere from making a ton of money towards actually having policy changes in governments or institutions or corporations, or there's a lot of imagination that can be applied for bad things that can happen with these things when it scales.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. It's a two-part question. Which came first, the CAPTCHA or the bot? And, it sounds like CAPTCHA is not enough anymore. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about why that's failing.
Yeah, I think we're going to hop right into that. That I think beyond the sophisticated outcomes, the ways in which attackers defeat technologies in place that are meant to make sure they're human has certainly got a lot more sophisticated. Before we hop into that, I do want to point out that the bar has also gotten a lot lower. Not only are more sophisticated outcomes sought by malicious attackers, but we now have a world where criminal enterprises actually sell access to these bot networks, right? So the job of a malicious attacker might be to build a botnet and then subsequently offer that botnet available as a software as a service, the same way we subscribe to Netflix or any productivity suite. And so there's a lot of capabilities that malicious bot actors are looking at, and a lot of more sophisticated outcomes. I really want to also really point out that they're not just knocking at the front door anymore. I think what I've seen over the last 12 to 24 months in the Verizon Breach Investigation Report, and other analysts are pointing to the fact that ATO and credential stuffing is a really big problem. And a lot of organizations are really under the belief that implementing an MFA technology at the front door, or implementing some sort of fraud protection technology as a digital experience, converts back to something that needs to be shipped by a fulfillment team. We really see attackers extending their reach and finding means by which the middle of a digital experience can be abused towards some malicious outcome. But to move back towards your point, Gary, yeah, there's the sophistication of bots themselves and the technologies that are used to make them appear as human really has changed quite a bit over the last number of years as well. We've seen bots move from yesterday's simple bots focused on the denial of service, which resided in data centers and caused large number of requests, for example, at a targeted enterprise. We've seen them to now living on devices. And I'm not just talking about desktops and laptops. I'm talking about mobile devices. I'm talking about TVs. Any form of IoT technology can be a landscape. And those landscapes are often more attractive because the software that runs on those landscapes is often updated far less frequently. It's more of a static object that exists. How often would they need to update the firmware in my IoT-enabled coffee pot, right? So there's really a movement from this unsophisticated bot that resides in a data center to those that reside on user devices. That's number one. The other damning piece of evidence relative to their existence on user devices is that they may participate in an active session while your user performs legitimate activities on that web landscape, right? So you may actually be simultaneously receiving good traffic from a user interacting with your website while their device simultaneously is facilitating the attacker's intent. So this really blurs the line when we think about how technologies that focus merely on user behavior are able to identify the danger from the noise, really. We've also seen them move away from having no way to replicate or present themselves as a real human, to having real users and real device IDs, as I just shared. We've seen them behave just like a user would, replicate mouse movements, replicate button clicks, replicate all different types of information that you would interrogate a user for, replicate the speed and timing that a user would navigate throughout a site. So they no longer behave like robots, they behave like humans. And finally, when we think about the practices behind, and this is kind of inferred by the sophistication I'm talking to, we see the creators of these bots employing business strategy in the development of their technology, right? They're no longer simply hacktivists that think it's fun to break things and want to deface web landscapes. These are folks that employ 2-week sprints that do a whole lot of thinking and structure around implementing systems thinking around the attacks that they launch. Dr. Russell, any other thoughts that you could share?
Absolutely. To bolt on to the communities that have expanded into this new form of very liquid enterprising is like drug cartels have botnets and botnet operations. That was unheard of. Like drug cartels dealing with like cybercrime, well, it's significantly less risky, but there's also a higher payout and a higher reward on the other end of the crime, because it is a very remote activity that is done. It is not a meat space activity. It is a cyberspace activity. We're 180 milliseconds away from just about anyone else on the planet in best latency scenarios, and there isn't something that you have, or you know that someone else on this planet doesn't want to have access to. And that is a new construct as it relates to how attractive cybercrime is in the first place. And now that it has flourished, it has demonstrated growth. It has demonstrated there's a full economy behind the entire thing. There's a whole bunch of guides on like how to get into this sort of thing, and the attraction is there, the growth is there, and the ease of access to be able to facilitate these activities is also there. But one thing that I would also like to bolt on in addition is that none of these things are terribly new or earth-shattering like new techniques or anything else in along those ways. It's just that they're now doing it at scale because we've standardized a lot of technology, standardized a lot of integration points and how things interop with each other. Whereas one of my early botnets I helped investigate was maybe 17 years ago, where it was a Eastern European crime ring that made a browser plugin that waited until you logged into your financial services portal, and then when you initiated a transaction, they initiated a transaction as well, but they would scrub the output of it on the web browser screen, so you didn't see it until you got your paper statement later that month, in which 30 days later, that's a difficult transaction to argue. It worked well for them because that institution had a lot of customers. Now, if you can go from like tens of thousands of customers and make it millions to tens to hundreds of millions of customers and subscribers in a particular ecosystem, but they all interact with it the same way, that's where the economies of crime scale, is when all that stuff becomes like, make it stick once and it sticks a million different ways. So that's what I would have as a very specific perspective as to why this is such a emerging and growing economy.
Yeah, so back to your question, Gary, on which came first, the chicken or the egg, or the CAPTCHA, or the technology that it was present on. I think it's a really complicated problem. I think that we see CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA, these technologies being used under the construct that these sophisticated means and these sophisticated approaches to defeating basically to being defeated it didn't exist, right? So I think that CAPTCHA was a reaction to unsophisticated bots, and what we now see are sophisticated bots defeating technologies like CAPTCHA. We also view the world as moving toward a more frictionless experience, right? Every day, Instagram, Facebook, these technologies will advertise something for me to buy, and occasionally I'm a sucker and I go buy one. And in the process of buying one of these goods, I've noted how any form of friction in the experience of buying it reduces the likelihood of me buying it, right? And so I think one of the important differences between a sophisticated technology like White Ops and a CAPTCHA product is our ability to identify bot technologies in place without introducing friction into the user experience, without impeding the user's ability to do what they're trying to do. I'd like to take a step closer to a customer that we helped with a problem, and really the first question I think that I hope folks on the line are asking themselves is, do I have this problem? And how would you know if you have this problem? And I think that's really where a lot of folks have a misconception. If you can't accurately identify throughout your entire digital experience, not just at the front door, what level of bot traffic is participating in your system's use along the entire digital journey from start to finish, you might end up like this customer did. And in a 1-week pilot with White Ops, they had the preconception that they had about 4% bot traffic present on their site. What they didn't realize is what could happen with some high worth pages that were behind their login interface, where a bot technology actually followed legitimate users into the user experience. An infected browser, an infected device might wait for a user to legitimately log in, and then at scale might use those legitimate user sessions to target and extract, scrape important data or perform some action on your environment. And in this case, we identified for this prospect in the early stages of our engagement, 45% bot traffic in their volume load. So let's just think about what that means beyond the cybersecurity lens. From a fraud lens, what does that mean from a data integrity or the perspective of a chief information officer? From an IT or operations perspective, what does that mean as it relates to the infrastructure you're paying for in the cloud, and what that infrastructure is actually facilitating? A lot of really powerful statements of value emerged within 1 week of using White Ops technology. So that's really just one case study, but I would like to zoom out and talk a little more broadly about White Ops' mission to not just defend our customers, but to defend the internet, so that you get a real picture for how White Ops goes about thinking about this challenge, and how we are here to support good humans. Dr. Russell, take it away.
Thank you, sir. So one thing that when from a personal experience, when I was looking to leave the FBI, I looked at I had a lot of opportunities, and I looked across the field, and the one that resonated with me within White Ops was the mission. And short of the disruption of the economics of cybercrime, the way that they went about it, which is the collective protection construct, where it's not just protecting our customers. If it will do good for the internet, we will do good for the internet as well. We will protect anyone and everyone as we need to. And that mission resonated with me, as it does with everyone else in the organization, which was why we feel like it makes it such a special place to be. And the tools and technologies and the drive that come out of it are unique in our particular place. So where one of the first demonstrations of the collective protection occurred was the other year, when we coordinated and worked with the FBI and Google and many of the other folks that you see in the list there, to take down a botnet called Eve. And Eve at the time was a very sophisticated botnet, in my perspective and opinion, in the sense that many of the folks that went after it were playing the whack-a-mole game. They come up with a detection against it, they whack them all, then Eve would come right back up again as the actors pivoted with the detection processes in place. And in fact, one of the humorous moments was when the actors started figuring out who on the good guys side was doing the actions against them, and then they started buying domain names to harass the people, or try to rattle the cage, if you will. So it turned into that construct of this is war. And well, at the end of the day, the efforts that the adversaries took was not enough for their own defense and protection, because we were able to identify enough artifacts about them, work with the FBI, work with our partners, work with our additional customers, and put an end to it. And the success of that was demonstrated by having the 4 Russians extradited out, and they're currently in the Eastern District in New York, dealing with the consequences of their actions. But this isn't just a one-off story for White Ops. We have a lot of other successes as well within the organization, and one of the ones that I'm also that just recently happened. I'm going to share a little bit more of a detailed narrative than the Eve event. The investigation that we recently did, and there are components of it that are still ongoing. We call TERRACOTTA. TERRACOTTA happened. It came in a couple of ways, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but it's been about an 8-month long investigation and a series of disruptions of that particular botnet. But the reason why we called it Terracotta is that like one infection and one particular point looked like, you know, the construct of a terracotta army. It was easily identifiable once you were able to identify, find that one nuance about it as to the tradecraft that was employed in order to get the malware out into the mobile devices, as well as doing stuff on the internet about, and committing the fraud. So the operation on this one, though, was a very fast-paced event where we went from not just identifying how it was getting into the market, but then resulting all the way through to the end of the collective protection construct and functionality that White Ops provides for just folks out there on the internet. So the specifically about Terracotta, so like what was it doing? So back in June, we, in our systems, out of our telemetry, we saw about 65,000 infected endpoints. And of that, there were approximately 5,500 application IDs that were being spoofed within the telemetry of the systems that we collect. So they had a fairly significant infection base, and they were taking some, what this means is, sure, the infection base, but they were taking some action in order to obfuscate their infection and their presence within that infection ecosystem. So one of there were two other things of note was the volume in which they were trying to commit their fraud, which was approximately like 2.4 billion requests a day, which is insane. But the outcome of it was like this signal went way above the noise floor, and the outcome was the triggering of trying to identify what it was and then figuring out how we go about stopping it. So the timeline of events, approximately this time last year, we saw the first wave of this thing. We saw those initial indicators that we saw from that previous slide. We saw the volume, we saw a signal spike come out of the noise floor, and we were very quick within a week or so of being able to identify it, model it, put an end to it. But we kept the protection mechanisms there in place because we knew that they would come back. And this is a part of the saga of the construct of the whack-a-mole component of doing defensive operations, because we know that when you go after something and force some pain as a strategy against the actor, they feel it, they resonate with it. They're humans as well. They want to be successful, so what do? They huddle up, and the more types of pressure you apply, the more opportunities you create for yourself to find, identify, and attribute who it is and where they are. So it's that game of go after the people, but leverage the technology in place in order to go after them. So wave 2 came around earlier this year, and with wave 2, we learned a whole lot more about it, and we were able to stop it a whole lot faster. And then wave 3 was this last summer, where it came back and it resulted in a near permanent takedown of the botnet. And as the capabilities of the systems from the adversaries evolve, we're pretty sure that there's going to be a wave 4, but the timelines between the other ones has extended so much that we know, A, we're pissing them off, which I enjoy, because that's only going to make them make more mistakes later. But B, their time to recovery is extended. So like the gaps between the activities is much longer, which means we're having a very good effect against their successful operations. They will evolve, they will adapt, they'll come back, but we're ready for them. And we even ourselves have developed new tooling specifically for this adversary that will hopefully, if/when they come back, will take us to the last step of being able to do attribution and more Eve style operations.
Dr. Ross, I got a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so do you remember when Dyn went down from a botnet attack on the East Coast, and then Twitter and Spotify were down for many people for a day? You know, all of the teenagers were freaking out, saying it was the end of the world. So that was a botnet attack where the bots were running in the the Netgear and the whoever, I forget the names, the home wireless
Mirai.
router, right? Oh yeah, Mirai. When you're taking down a botnet, do you help unwind code that's hidden in our home routers?
If the botnet is affecting your home router, if that is a part of the infection base, then absolutely. In this specific example, it was infecting mobile phones and leveraging the something that you have and the something that you are component in order to facilitate the crime. But yes, if there is something, and our construct of collective protection extended for free to all those users that were infected. We gave the information necessary to the providers for free so that the infections would stop, and that was the value of the collective protection aspect of kind of like a code of ethics in a way. But to kind of give you an example of what it looked like and how it worked, was, nothing in this world is for free. So if you went into the app stores, they would present themselves as saying like, hey, get some free shoes, hey, free teeth whitening, hey, $500. But after you like run this app for like 2 weeks or so, that's they did not do anything in the construct of like how people think about hacking is done, where like I'm going to write an O-day and unleash it on the internet and get what I get, like a Mirai sort of thing. Where Mirai actually wasn't a no-day, it was a whole bunch of like really bad firmware and people exploiting bad decisions and product life cycles. But in this case, it was a lure. It was, I'm going to trick you into voluntarily installing my malicious software onto your device. And the trick in this case was the exploit was the promise of free stuff. So that targets an ecosystem of people who resonate with that sales tactic. So that was the unfortunate piece of it. However, what was funny was reading the product reviews for the apps. So they said, hey, we're going to get these shoes and we're going to ship it directly to your door. And everyone would respond back into it and go, oh, wow, I can't wait. This is so exciting. Like, I get shoes. Awesome sauce. But ultimately, at the end of the day, none of this ever showed up. So this goes into like one of my own personal things is that when I look at stuff online, I don't read by the 5-star reviews or the 4 stars. I read the worst reviews first and then go backwards from it. All of these apps had some really honest reviews as it related to the authenticity of what was being sold. So from a user's defensive posture, don't just gloss over the 1-star stuff. It could provide you some intelligence as well for your own selves moving forward. But what we learned out of this particular infection were, who the actual victims are. And when people think about, advertising space or space associated with credential stuffing, where it's a login portal and something's following you through your experience, it's not just the store or the entity on that end that is affected by the crime. In this case, the users, the people who had the phones, were harmed by these actors, because this particular malware, we were the only company that was able to get it to successfully detonate in our sandbox environment. And what we saw was the phones that we got it to detonate on would overheat. Their battery life would be destroyed and prematurely aged. One of the phones stopped working. The temperature damage to the components on it and the full blown, like the phone trying to balance like CPU utilization with charging rate and trying to just not catch on fire was so aggressive for that piece of hardware that one day when I looked at it, I was like, why isn't this thing working in the lab? And I looked at it, white screen, didn't do anything beyond that. It would never boot up ever again. It wouldn't even charge. So the users, the people who are installing this stuff are victims from two aspects, not just from the loss of or the potential loss of their hardware, but this botnet targeted US-based IP addresses that were from residential or cellular IP space. So that means they're leveraging your bandwidth. And what I mean by leveraging your bandwidth, this screenshot is a demonstration of the volume of traffic that came out of it. Over 200,000 requests per hour. Each day, each phone that I had was generating 16 gigabytes of traffic. Can you imagine what 16 gigabytes of traffic costs on a mobile data plan for someone that doesn't have unlimited mobile data? That's another victimization.
And I want to add a couple things. I want to point out that in this case, we saw the user tricked into facilitating the installation of the botnet technology. But we're seeing every single week the release or discovery of zero-day exploits that require nothing but a user to visit a infected page. I think, in fact, if memory serves, there was a zero-day released in a major web browser last week. Yes, so we're seeing this every week. Not only are the approaches to infect devices getting more and more sophisticated, but in addition to that, what these botnets do once infected is becoming more modular. Back in my days at Malwarebytes, we talked about the concept of modular malware and this idea by which using a builder, someone might select features and functions that they would like to perform. So, and then other technologies that I've worked with in my past serve as a delivery system or a rail system between different endpoints or different devices. And I would argue that malicious attackers are thinking the same way. How can I infect and use the bot technology as a distributed delivery system or rail system, and how can I modularize the technology that will actually weaponize the botnet beyond its installation.
Exactly, and what these things highlighted is the importance of the mission of collective protection, because the victims of botnets are not just the folks who are losing the money on the first iteration. It's the internet service providers that have to bear the traffic, the data hosting providers that have to deal with the processing of said traffic. It is the endpoint itself that is infected, that is pushing said traffic, as well as the device itself that is also additionally infected, where it's degrading the user's experience and prematurely aging the equipment itself in some cases. So yeah, it's a it's a different way of thinking about the importance and the impact of it. So it's that whole thing of where everyone loses except for the criminals in this case.
Even to say that once infected, attackers perform reconnaissance to identify what's of value, what's consistently visited by infected users, right? They do their own form of analytics, meaning if they infect 1,000 devices and recognize that 50% or more of those 1,000 devices visit the same medical portal, and they can extract or scrape proprietary or sensitive or personal information from that medical portal. They're looking at how the infections and what the infections provide them access to might be weaponized in really sophisticated ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of get into a specific example, talking about TERRACOTTA as to some of the sophistication that goes on. I won't get into all the technical bits for this presentation. If anyone wants to read more about it, we have 2 papers about it on our website. We have like an executive summary sort of thing about the investigation, and we also have deep dive technical information as another product for free as it relates to this thing. But what was bemusing to me as I was going through this investigation was taking a look at what they were doing in order to commit their fraud, where they were pivoting off of existing libraries and inserting their own, in order that facilitated the easier spoofing and manipulation of tags and fields and user behavior that most systems take for as a trusted authority. So they were able to spoof and shim those internal software processes that allowed their bots to functionally operate. But the other thing that was amusing about it was the implementation of a evasion tag. So if they detected that someone was trying to block them or anything else along those lines, they had a counter to the counter sort of gimmick that they were trying to employ. Once we were able to find that, this is where like that tiny little bit of a whack-a-mole game can come into place. But this is not a new novel technique overall in the grand scheme of things, because this is the cat and mouse game between botnet operators and the folks that find and catch and stop them. But this is just a clever way in which they were able to take that strategy and implement it in this technology platform. Frank, did you have anything you would like to add to any of that?
No, that's right on. I mean, we're seeing tremendous evasion techniques employed by these botnets.
So the at a high level, I just wanted to quickly kind of talk about, it was a savvy operation at the end of the day, and the way they also finally avoided some detections was just breaking the rules of certain business processes. And one of the things that there's kind of like a sub requirement is having a app ads.txt component to things, and they just said, nah, I'm just not going to do that. So there was kind of like a protective a failure of protective business processes. So it's kind of like having a intrusion detection system enabled and just disabling that one critical rule and check that would catch like Mimikatz moving across the wire to the inside of your environment. That was essentially like, this should have been a good detection mechanism to say, like, if you didn't do this, we're just not going to do anything with you. It's, in other words, it's in the equivalent of the RFC, but it never made it down to the actual implementation at the end of the day. Kind of like a typical security 101 life lesson sort of thing. So anyways, the last two things I liked about this was
Dr. Russ,
oh, sure.
Sorry to interrupt, but I got to catch this before we get past Terracotta. This stuff is sophisticated. And, I heard that global drug crime used to be the largest form of crime worldwide. I think last year was 600 billion. Cyber crime this year, I think, is over 1.2 trillion and growing. So more than double of drug crime, cyber crime. Does that mean that they have, rooms of programmers writing this amazing code and studying, getting their degrees with PhDs in AI and machine learning and saying, you know what, I don't want to write an antivirus or firewall program. I want to join the dark web and, I want to write this code. Part one of the question. And part two is, if it's this sophisticated, do they lease it out so you don't have to be smart? Can you buy or rent this stuff? Because I don't want to write the code if I'm the bad guy.
So first part of the question, I'm going to do a little bit of trip in memory lane for like, where did all of this start from? And if we want to go way back in time to like the origin of malware, like the Morris worm, and things along those lines. Like there was this all started off as like for funsies and like thought experiments, or like there was no position associated with I can make money on this, until I would say like maybe the mid 90s or so was when some of that was propping up. But where you saw the reason why you saw some of that propping up or popping up was there were collapses of governments going on in various countries, and that meant that there were a lot of really smart and brilliant people that were out of work that needed to eat. And the criminal syndicates and the organizations scooped them up, said, hey, why don't we just try to rob some banks online? And that's just kind of how it started, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew from there. And then all of a sudden there's going to be at one point where like everyone in the I'm conjuring like a scene in my head of like Crimes Are Us, where it's like a giant convention of where you have like the mafia that shows up and the drug cartel. Oops, I apologize. Where you have like all these various folks show up out of nowhere, and they all kind of like compare notes of like how's business this year, and they're like anyways, more and more and more of them have paid attention and seen the growth and economic and business potential in this. So that the talent is there. Where it is now and what it's changed to now is a full-blown business model, where even with the recent ransomware stuff that's gained a lot of traction, and from a personal opinion, disgusts me, because who goes after hospitals? That's not cool under any stretch of any imagination. Leave hospitals alone. That's a war crime in my book. But anyways, the ease of being able to pull off those operations, it has the bars dropped really, really low. So it's Frank.
Yeah, I just want to add it. I think it's a slippery slope. I'm turning 40 in a few months, and I think back to the days of BBSs and AOL, sysops areas that we snuck into, and and GeoCities and all these different things I did as a teenager for fun, right? For hacktivist purposes.
Speak closer into my lapel.
Yeah, and and I think about building computers and how fun it was with 30-pin memory and MFM hard drive. But things have changed, and I think I certainly hope that there's not kids out there saying, I want to get my PhD so I can become a cyber criminal. But I would say this: it's a slippery slope, right? And these decisions feel like they're easy to make for some of these people, whether it be because they buy access to technology and the first time they do it, it's just for fun, and then they suddenly realize how much money there is in doing this kind of thing, or they just do something for some personal reason, and then somehow that personal reason becomes a clouded vision of what they need to do with their lives. I would say the bar getting lower definitely facilitates more people moving in the wrong direction down that slippery slope.
Frank, what's interesting, and Dr. Russell, we're looking at only 4 Russians that caused one of the biggest ad tech breaches. So it doesn't sound like you need a lot of staff to pull this off.
It all depends on what you want to do. Like BEC is another huge emerging, well, it's not emerging, it's just another huge space that I think even is way bigger than just like the metrics of traditional cybercrime sort of stuff on its own. That the name is business email compromise. Those are compromises occurring via email correspondence, social engineering, just at its basis. And to me, that's just mind blowing as to the reach and the impact and the creativity that criminal groups and syndicates and institutions and mindsets can come up with. Because also the broader thing to remember is that, like Frank's and my t-shirt says the word human on it. This is a human problem. This is a humanity problem. We're not going after the evil T-1000 yet, knock on wood. But it is still 2020. But the construct of that these are people on the other end, there's a spectrum of tools and solutions that could be brought to the table that will either reform people, help them change their minds and opinions. Maybe they don't want to be doing this. They're just in a bad situation, this is the skill and the place and the opportunity that they have in order to put bread on the table. So there's multiple tools and options available to dealing with this problem. But any chance we get to remove a bot operator, we feel is like another head off the multi-headed beast of this particular challenge. Frank, did you have anything you would?
No,
like to...
I guess I would say we're here to disrupt the economics of this cybercrime, right? We're here to reduce friction for organizations that are experiencing the problem, or may not even realize they're experiencing the problem, and introduce friction as it relates to that slippery slope I talked about, making it harder, making it not as easy of a mistake to make. So I certainly think that that's consistent with the mission of White Ops. Back to TERRACOTTA, Dr. Russell, you were sharing a little bit about the
Sure.
collaboration.
Yeah, and this would be a fantastic way to wrap it up, because for the TERRACOTTA piece, because in this particular slide, this was towards the end of July, was when we worked with our partners and our customers to finally come through and say, all right, we got everything we need to do. Let's yank the cord on this one. And we did. And you can see the dramatic impact that it had from when the enforcement went in to remove the apps proactively off of people's phones, and then the slump of traffic that happened shortly thereafter.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll just skip ahead a little here and talk a little bit about
I'd like to real quick show that one slide.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure.
The enforcement. So like for the collective protection piece, like what the end of it was, like, if you see these alerts show up on your device, it means that someone out there did goodwill and worked with these providers to help clean up the internet. It's not always us, but we work with everyone when and where we can in order to have that result. So that's what I just wanted to say on that one. Sorry.
Sure. No worries. Yeah. So really, I think what's important to really the conclusion we've come to here at White Ops is that it takes a special approach to detect sophisticated bots, and the approach we employ is a multi-layered approach. It allows us to detect sophisticated bots and automated attacks with unmatched accuracy without compromising the user's experience, right? So we're reducing friction, or there's no puzzles to solve. There's no annoying find all the traffic lights or trucks or crosswalks in my picture to move a user through. But at the same time, reducing that friction and increasing the friction substantially and continuously for attackers, whether they be sophisticated folks with PhDs or script kiddies who have downloaded something on the darknet that they're interested in trying out. And so really, I think the first question that we have to ask each other, or ask ourselves, is, how big of a problem is this in your environment? And if you can't answer that, it's the same thing as being unable to answer a simple question like how many computers are online, how many endpoints are currently running in your environment. If you don't have the ability to assess risk, there is no way that you're able to be prepared for that risk. And I think where some folks think they're protected is that they think they're protected by a feature that's present in a technology like a WAF or a CDN. And we really don't think of automated attack protection as a feature. I think the evidence that Dr. Russell shared and some of the methodology he's going to cover today really points to why it's not a feature and the level of sophistication necessary in a continuous model by which we basically assess evidence collected in over 10 trillion transactions a week. It's a crazy number. We'll talk about how we come to that number and why that number is a real number in just a minute. But and then from that, apply both computers and humans that have been doing this as long as Dr. Russell and others on our team. So Dr. Russell, take it away. Talk a little bit about our approach and and what is foundationally different, starting with technical evidence.
Sure, absolutely. Now, having come from a world where everything was evidentiary based, this is actually like a critical core component. You got to collect indicators that whether or not you are the thing that's interacting with you is what it actually says it is. If it presents itself as saying like, hey, I'm Netscape version, whatever, and then you do a piece of software test that actually illuminates that it's Internet Explorer or Chrome or Opera or anything else, then you know that it's lying, and you've collected evidence that it is lying. So we make our decisions similarly in that construct with our tooling and capabilities, where we take a look at a lot of different parameters, a little over 2,500 different tests and probes in order to validate that you are what you say you are when you're interacting with our systems. And we use this to refine and further define what constitutes as the truthiness of the whole thing. So and when we discuss like the truthiness of the actual raw signal, that turns back and around into a variety of different models that we use within the product lines and tooling in order to more easily and quickly identify clusters of other activity, not just affecting our customers, but also other sources of data, in order to step back and try to look and see look for a bigger picture. Because everyone who has a defensive strategy sees the world through a straw, and we recognize that as well. We see only what we see. We don't get to see the entirety of the internet. Few places may be able to do that, but the construct behind it, though, is that we have to be able to step back and then connect the dots. We use software to be able to help us do that through various machine learning models and consistent tuning. And then there's the component where I sit within, which is the threat intelligence piece. So the previous components look internally to our data sets of what our customers are experiencing. My team looks externally to the world and tries to provide explanations for the causes and the symptoms of the behaviors that we're seeing. To be able to go into the software repositories and the malware repositories, the underground forums, the other social networks, our peers. I don't believe I have any competitors in this space. I have a lot of peers because we are all holding hands together working with that same construct of collective protection. But that's what we do in my particular team, and what makes White Ops really special in my opinion, is the coupling of the internal review and the external optics, and then combining that together in order to more quickly streamline and affect observations. And then the last piece is just the continuous adaptation. What's true today is not tomorrow, and that's just a realization of a fact of life about technology and actors, and like the fact that and recognition that we're not going after software, we're going after the people that are creating the software that is causing the problem. If we can stop the leak upstream, then the rest of the flooding stops. I didn't know if you had anything else you would like to add to that.
No, I'd love to you just focus a little bit on the power of our threat intelligence team. I think this really isn't a problem that could just be solved with an algorithm. It's still a problem that involves humans really thinking about how the technology is being sophisticated means it's being strung together to achieve malicious outcome.
Absolutely. So the thing that I believe that has made us extremely successful is that while the company's mission is to disrupt the economics of cybercrime, my team's contribution to that is by providing attribution in order to work it upstream. So our team finds the emerging threats, we find where it's happening on the internet, and then we take it all the way to the door of the actors. And when people talk about the different types of attribution that occur, we really excel at crushing the nut of what hard attribution is considered, of being able to take it to the identification of those individuals. And it's because of our partnerships and our working with all the other organizations that are out there. It is a collective community operation at the end of the day. So that's why we feel that we're extremely successful in this space. So
I just want to revisit that quote that our founder and CEO Tamer brought to the table. It says, "If you could look like millions of humans, what would you do?" Now, when we said at the beginning of this, what if you had the power of 1 million humans for bad or evil intention? And really, what we believe here is that the only way to defeat the power of a million users who are maybe contributing to bad, they may not even realize it may just be their device. The only way to defeat that million is with the power of the collective intelligence offered through 10 trillion interactions a week, over 1 trillion a day, instances where we're witnessing over 300 million unique devices, searching, shopping, socializing, collecting over 2,500 unique forms of network, device, interaction, behavior, signal, and then making decisions and defending from attacks before those attacks reach your doorstep. Meaning, if a White Ops customer is attacked, all White Ops customers are immediately defended before those attackers reach your landscape. And this is really powerful in that it really raises the stakes, right? It introduces friction. A failed attack is no longer just a try again or use another life for an attacker. A failed attack now significantly raises the bar and introduces friction across these major internet platforms. So really, if you have these challenges, if you're struggling with account takeover, new account fraud, payment fraud, streaming fraud, content manipulation, you're concerned that any portion of your digital experience may be compromised or may be being abused, or maybe even just being aggregated for some later form of abuse, we're here to help, and we would love to have you join our collective protection and contribute to defending not just your organization landscapes, but the whole internet. So I'll leave you with that. Gary,
before you end, sorry, quick question on that.
Sure.
You guys are protecting some major internet providers, major corporations. Are there particular markets that are under attack with botnets that they're not really aware of that you've noticed? For example, it seems obvious to me that e-commerce, right, during let's say Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Amazon and Walmart.com, they're all going to be under attack. But
Bot Friday? You mean Black Friday, right? Bot Friday.
I'm sorry, did I get it backwards? Cyber.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of
Black
attacks.
Friday, Cyber Tuesday. Anyway, like what verticals? I'm sure based on the amount of traffic and the analysis you've done and the deep dives, what other market sectors should be coming to you saying, hey guys, I think I need your help because, well, they're either under attack and don't know it, or they do know it. But it's, it's more than just banking, e-commerce.
Yeah, fintech, gaming, e-commerce, healthcare, all forms of industry are really experiencing an attack. I'll let Dr. Russell comment on this as well. But like the point I want to leave you with is that I think folks think, well, I'll put a padlock on the front door. I'll put a deadbolt on the front door with 2FA, right? And that'll keep all the automated attacks out of my environment. Or I'll double check that it's a real address or it's a real email address when I, ship something or when I allow somebody to create an account. I can promise you that every system, whether it be a system that you could just register by visiting a website, or it's an employee system that's used or to facilitate a relationship between a consumer and a business, or between a business and a business, or an employee and a business, every system is a target. If an attacker gains access, they're then going to look at what's available and think very creatively about how to achieve some malicious outcome. Russell, you want to add any thoughts on industries that you're seeing real surges in? Certainly this week, upcoming, it's Bot Friday. We're calling it. We see a lot of impact in the e-commerce world, especially relative to COVID. But go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the one that I feel that is not necessarily emerging, but doesn't have enough optics on it, is local and city governments, primarily because they have a requirement by law to be accessible, to have their platforms out there. And what their platforms consist of are sometimes credit card payment things, like to submit your city bills or provide for donations. And there was one city that I was talking to fairly recently where they have such a challenge where they have a credit card payment portal that's publicly facing, that's meant for people to provide donations to a specific fund to support firefighters and things like that. When I brought up the question about microtransactions, where people may be doing what was the biggest donation volume that you see, like scale-wise, Is it more than $5 at a time? Is it $20 at a time? Is it $1,000? What do you see? And they go, we see a lot of stuff that's less than $1. And to me, that was like, wow, that's people testing credit cards in that particular system. So from the construct or the optics of places where, hey, I'm a criminal, I just got this dump of something, I need to test it. I'd like to see more organizations look at the places, the sandboxes and the playgrounds where the data sets are being tested in. And that to me is a gap in industry as well.
Yeah, and if organizations don't nip it in the bud early and participate in stopping carding or card cracking, as Russell shared, I can promise you're going to become a target of the abuse of those cards once they're cracked, right? If you think, well, they're just cracking the card on my account or on my website, but they're going to use it elsewhere. I mean, certainly they're going to use it on your site as well, or find something else to use your site for. If they used your site for one malicious outcome, they're going to try and use it again for another malicious outcome. So really, I want to leave everyone with this concept of keeping it human, and think about it not just as human, but as good human, not a bad human or a bad bot, participating in your web landscape's utilization. And the impact that has on infrastructure, the impact that has on business decisions you're making, the impact that has on revenue. I mean, the impact, it could be tremendous. And the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you have a realistic picture of how automated attacks are presenting themselves to your web landscapes, not just at the front door, throughout the entire digital experience, from the first thing they do to the last thing they do before signing off your website or your application. And I really want to leave the audience with that message, with that charge to really help us keep it human, help us in defending you, defend the internet, defend us all. And please reach out, and we're happy to discuss and offer you the opportunity to see how much bot traffic or automated attacks are a part of your web landscapes at your convenience.
That sounds great. Gentlemen, thank you so much for teaching us about the top 5 automated attack vectors targeting your applications and customers and how to stop them. I think this was a great deep dive. We've learned a lot about the sophistication of botnets and how to deal with them and how much money is at stake. Our businesses are at stake. So again, to our attendees, please grab the 3 attachments under handouts and stay tuned for an email from White Ops with these slides and other content. And don't forget, if you need to contact the speakers, they've put their LinkedIn accounts up kindly for you. Please grab that information. Grab Dr. Russ and Frank's LinkedIn, and then visit them online at whiteops.com and come back next time for an exciting episode of Cyber Defense Webinars. Dr. Russ, Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Hope everyone has a wonderful holiday season. Take care.
Be safe, y'all.
Bye.